alone, or a migrant from some other part of the world. They are, even the people who are best prepared are being told they have to fill in 85-page documents and itemise every date in the last, well, since they moved here, when they left the country or returned to the country. Well, I don't know if you've got records for all your holidays, going back that far. I certainly don't. And e-calendars didn't exist that far ago. So we have many, many worried people who think that they're going to be put out of the country. Now, our MP recently told us it was a no-brainer. It would all be just fine. It made perfect sense. However, he then walked through the lobbies in the Houses of Parliament and voted against the amendment to allow EU citizens to stay. Had I been in Parliament, had I been Theresa May, I would have taken the moral high ground on this one. I would have stood up and said, these people are good for our economy, they're good for our society, and we need to treat them honourably. We will maintain their status. And then I think everyone else in the EU would have fallen into line. As it is, we're trying to use people and their lives as bargaining chips and our businesses, and I think it's going to damage us sorely.
Thank you, Judith, and a prize for all those who spotted the deliberate mistake. Apologies, Judith, I have failed to introduce any of you. I know you're all terribly well known, but perhaps we ought to do it a little bit more efficiently. So, the lady who's just spoken on my far left is Judith Bunting, the Liberal Democrat candidate. Judith comes from a scientific background with a successful career in scientific journalism and broadcasting. She lives in Newbury and says that one of her priorities is to give young people in the area the very best start in life.
Pick up the handheld. But the quiet might work so.
Is that dying on me?
It might work, yeah.
The pies are...
That's on.
That is, that's deliberate mistake number 2. Or sabotage, one of the two. Thank you, Derek. On my left, the Green Party candidate, Paul Field, has lived in Thatcham for the last 16 years. He's a primary school head teacher in Basildon and is also chairman of the West Berkshire Head Teachers Association. Ex-chairman of the West Berkshire Head Teachers Association. On my right, dissatisfied with all political parties, David Yates started his own apolitical party in Newbury in 2007. A former army surveyor, David is now a builder and believes that councillors and presumably MPs should represent the wishes of the voters and not their party's best interest. Next to him is Richard Benyon, the Conservative candidate. Richard has contested this seat since 1997, finally defeating the Liberals in 2005. After the boundary changes in 2010, he finds he has to commute a few hundred yards to the Newbury constituency from his house in Englefield. On the very... Round of applause for Mr. Benyon, thank you. And on my far right, Alex Skirvin, your Labour candidate, was born in Preston, Lancashire, and formerly employed by Ofcom, now lives in Newbury, and works for a local telecommunications company, which I believe begins with a V and ends with a bill. Thank you, Alex. Judith, apologies for that. Are you okay? No. Is there anything you want to add to your... no, thank you very much. Alex, would you like to pick up that question on reduction in immigration after Brexit?
And it is working, isn't it? It is. So, I think it's a real tragedy for our country that we're endangering the migrant status of people who are already here, who have lived here for years, who've had families here or established here, and have expectations of our country which are entirely reasonable because of the contribution they have made to our society. It's Labour policy and a strong personal belief of mine that we should guarantee the rights of everyone who is already here. And as for its impact on businesses and local services, I think it's perfectly feasible that could be significant, yes. But what I'd like to highlight, actually, is the choice that stands before us at this election, which is really the nub of the issue in terms of the impact of the economy. Because we are going into a period in which we're going to be negotiating a new relationship with Europe. Judith would have you believe that a never-endum is the best thing for businesses and the uncertainty that would bring. Richard reluctantly is going to be dragged through the lobbies to vote for a hard Brexit. And I do say reluctantly, because the thing about Richard, he's a very loyal man, he's loyal to a fault, but that fault happens to be the Conservative Party. And then we have the Labour plan, which will unambiguously put the needs of our economy and jobs first. We won't become the only country in virtue of the Western world to place the needs of immigration and play the game of magic numbers above the needs of our economy in places like Hungerford and across West Berkshire. That's my position. It's the position of the Labour Party, and I believe it's the most credible economic position out of the candidates before you tonight.
Thank you, Alex. Richard Benyon, I think yours is the only party who's decided to reduce immigration.
Well, I think that this question is actually the low-hanging fruit of any deal. There are 1.2 million UK citizens who live in the EU, and there are over 4 million EU citizens that live here. And it seems to me the most basic, easiest thing to come to an agreement. First of all, I will not walk through any lobby if some daft government in the future was going to expel people who've been married to British people and living here for 15 years. For goodness sake. I mean, that is not going to happen. The Article 50 vote was just to do that, to trigger Article 50. And I was absolutely clear that that should have been an unencumbered piece of legislation. And all the amendments, many of which I looked and contributed to very closely, it was not that sort of gig. It was something to just get the Article 50 in vote and move on. I think it's a great shame that when Theresa May put it to the other European leaders back last year, that we could settle this one in the form of a letter of comfort, just some words that we would be assuring that we would do it. But they said no, they wanted to be part of the negotiation. So we have to protect the rights of UK citizens living in the EU. And on the crucial point about business, yeah, we've got to get this right. Many of you will know that I campaign pretty hard in this room, apart from anywhere else, to stay in the European Union. But I'm a Democrat, and I recognise that my side lost, and we've got to make this work. And one of the areas we've really got to make this work is in terms of making sure West Berkshire businesses continue to get the skills and expertise they want. So you can all think of an engineering company that I was talking to an electronics engineering business owner, who can't get the type of engineers he wants, and he wants to continue to be, and he should be able to get that. We have clearly said that we will still allow into this country people, whether they're from EU countries or beyond, that our economy needs, and that can be perfectly easily assessed through trade bodies, through chambers of commerce, through all the other kind of networked organisations that we have in this country, and we can continue to get the skilled jobs and the unskilled jobs that we need to keep our economy buoyant.
Thank you, Richard. David, is this about politics or people?
Well, I think it's about people, but I'm not sure that... Is that not working? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Am I on? I can't see that we're going to send a great raft of people home. It's not the sort of kind of thing we do. And I'm assuming this is the immigration question, that we didn't get a first sight of all the questions as they are. But going to this election, there's nobody going to vote on the 8th of June who isn't either an immigrant to this country or the direct descendant of an immigrant to this country. So I think it's just a scare tactic, this talk of sending people away. Brexit, and to your question in terms of the economic impact, the people who voted to leave, I don't think were sort of doing it in terms of trying to punish business. I think people were just genuinely worried that there are so many other strains on all of society that we can really sort of cope with what's going on. And if businesses locally are so dependent on migrant labour, we've got to wonder why our own people can't do those jobs. What's going on wrong? What else is going wrong that we can't fulfil engineering tasks with our own engineers, people who've got the skills to do it? There's got to be a larger question, and I think the Brexit was going to shine a light on that issue, that we're just allowing a generation to fester without sort of saying, come on, pull your socks up, there's work here for you to do. And I think immigration is just being blamed for that.
Thank you. Can we have our next question, please, from... That's deliberate mistake number 3.
I've got on my bingo card. House!
What's your name again? Paul, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it is a great question because it touches on so many factors and issues that have been sparked by this whole Brexit, I would say debate, but fiasco might be closer to a more honest description of what actually happened a year and a half ago. This really is a good example of the chaos that probably awaits us in the months and years ahead, and certainly is a very good example of the appalling lack of quality that occurred in the debate leading up to the referendum on both sides of it. I was, on balance, I voted to remain within there, but I was aware of the questions and the issues and the concerns that a lot of people had about the European Union as a concept and various things. But it was all very chaotic, and some people voted for some reasons and some people voted... I don't think anybody voted because they wanted to, send your employees home and other friends and colleagues that we have. But I pick up on Dave's point, is that, we're not going to send Ralph home because that's not what we do. But I think before this Brexit debate, talking about desperate people fleeing war, as an example, wasn't something that we did. We didn't talk about them as cockroaches and as them and as hordes of scroungers. We didn't talk about other people in the way that we do now. And we've normalised through this debate talking about others in a way that is less positive and is less British, as I understand my nationality, my culture to be. So it's a really good example of some of the real flaws that we've got, and if we don't learn from it and actually use this as a very quick example of a way of demonstrating, actually we haven't become that sort of place, we haven't become those people. We are still British, we still believe in an open, forward-looking, outward-looking democracy, and we still welcome people to come and make the amazing contributions that they have done up to this point, and they will continue to do, I'm certain, in the future.
Thank you, Paul. Our next question now comes from Mr. Tim Bevan.
Trying again.
Yes, you're on now.
Following the West Berkshire Council's decision to approve a 100-house development on a greenfield site within an AONB on the south side of Hungerford, despite overwhelming local objections, including from Hungerford Town Council, how important do you think the views of local government should be in local planning issues.
Thank you, Tim. That's following West Berkshire Council's decision to approve a 100-house development to the south of Hungerford on a greenfield site within an AONB, despite many local objections, including Hungerford Town Council. How important do you think the views of local government should be in local planning issues? This proposal was strongly objected to by the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty, who say that the exceptional circumstances to justify major development with an AONB have not been demonstrated, and better alternative sites are available. But their views and opinion of Hungerford Town Council do seem to have been ignored. Richard Benyon, would you like to?
Hungerford is blessed in one sense, in many senses, but in this particular sense, in having development constrained by having a marsh on one side and a common on the other, which makes the areas where it can expand few and far between. The issue here is about housing supply. And these are, one has to say, decisions that an MP doesn't get involved in. They are strictly the responsibility of local authorities. But I'm very happy to give you my view. And my view is to support your local councillors and your local town council in the objections they made. But what we have a problem with is that housing has to be provided. And it may not be a universally popular view in the room, but I believe we need to build more houses. And that's on the basis of conversations that I've had, for example, with your head teacher and chairman of governors at John O'Gaunt, and a general belief from a lot of people that they want homes for future people to keep to be able to continue to live in this community, that will have an affordable element to them, and that they will have homes to live in. Now, there are plenty of other sites I know that people were looking at around the town, but if those sites aren't available because they have complex ownerships or they have contaminated land or whatever it is, and they will not get houses built on them in time, well, then you create a lacuna, a hole in the planning system, and a developer can come in and get refused by West Berkshire Council, but go to the inspector, who will say West Berkshire is not delivering the number of houses for all the people that want them in a place like Hungerford. Therefore, we will allow this to go ahead, and you could get a much worse arrangement than you will get up on the Salisbury Road. Now, I understand that development has a request for 40% affordable housing, and that is really important. There is one hopeful sign that I'm not going to give an indication as to whether that will go ahead or not. But the site that I've been particularly trying to help for many years is the one down by the station, which is zoned for commercial use. Now, if we can find another place for commercial use and flip it with this one, you could get houses built on a brownfield site close to the station in a really exciting development that will create a gateway development for people arriving on the train to Hungerford. And that seems to me a good thing to fight for, and that's something as an MP that I would continue to do.
Paul, another greenfield site for the chop?
It would be worrying. I can understand the local frustrations and concerns. Clearly, concreting over a greenfield site in an area of natural beauties isn't a core green policy. Indeed, it's something that we would actively work to avoid. We don't want to put our heads in the sand and pretend that there isn't a housing crisis, that we don't need to do something about it. But the specific question was actually, I think, really relating to local democracy and local engagement. And the problem that we've got here, it seems to be that you've got a load of Conservative councillors objecting to the behaviour of a load of Conservative councillors who are then forced to do things by a Conservative government who are setting a tone and an agenda. And I think that's a real problem. For me, a priority, and for the Green Party, one of our most centrally held values is all around local democracy. It's about bringing power out of Westminster and back into the local democracy. And I think, yeah, life is hard and it is complicated, and Richard's absolutely right. This isn't just a straightforward A or B, and they just happened to choose B because they were in it for the profit. It was not as simple as that, or as devious as that. It was complicated. But I think local people care enough about their local places to be bothered by complicated, to work together to find a solution for complicated and difficult. And I think that if you were to have a more Green Party approach to local government and to local accountability and to local democracy, I can absolutely guarantee that that conversation would be happening on a regular basis, and local views would be actively sought and actively acted upon. So I think you're absolutely right to be frustrated in Hungerford about this particular one, but I think it's a national issue, and I think it's something that we need to work very, very hard to get power away from Westminster and back into local people's lives.
Thank you. Judith, would you like to take one?
Hello, Tim. Nice to see you again after this afternoon. Tim put this question to me this afternoon on the doorstep, so I'm sorry if you've heard some of this before. We, as Liberal Democrats, also believe in local democracy, but it is situations like this when I start to wonder whether I could end up voting against my party in the future. Not because I disagree with the principle, but when you have a poor local council and an MP who is not representing his local citizens and trying to work with the council to change things for the better, then I worry that the system doesn't work. So in this situation, you've got houses being proposed, possibly, hopefully not being built, on the south of the town. Who, in their right mind, would have people living there and then commuting through the centre of your lovely high street? It's not safe, it's not reasonable, and if you want to preserve the nature, the rural nature of Hungerford, you're not going to do that. But somehow this plan is in place. Now, I saw an alternative plan put to me by one of your number a couple of years ago, and this included development around the station, as Richard mentioned. It's an excellent idea. I've also had people talking to me about potential alternatives on the north side of the town, which makes much more sense because you're near the A4, you're near the M4, unless everyone on the south is going to commute to Salisbury, but I'm not aware of it being that industrial an area that it'll take people. So why is the council not paying attention to this? I've seen them in Newbury try and do compulsory purchase all over the place to get the land they need for housing, but they don't seem to be proposing it here. Why, as our MP, let's see, a couple of years ago I heard about one plan. I know that group had been working on it for a few years, so we're now talking about 5 or 6 years when Richard has not managed to work with his council to change their minds and come up with a better idea. So, how much power should go to local government? At the moment, they have responsibility and power without finances. The Conservative government has cut our budget here by 44%. Again, with no active opposition from our MP. That's a great shame. I believe in local democracy. I believe that we should be ruling our own affairs. But when the larger local democracy doesn't listen to the smaller and ignores, one of the things I've loved about this debate in Hungerford is that you guys have all been so reasonable. You have not just said, we don't want houses here. What your town councillor said is, we acknowledge the need for houses here. We know our young people who could stay here if we had enough homes, would like to stay, and we have alternative plans, and it's shocking that nobody is listening and nobody is working with you to make it happen.
Thank you, Judith. I didn't appreciate that you'd been primed on the question, but never mind. David.
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody's answered the question yet. I think Tim asked about the relevance of local councils. I'm going to go slightly off beam here and tell you the story of why I became involved in politics. 2007, I went to a meeting of